Okay. Hello, my name is Sal Soto, here with my partner Leo Avila. Today we're interviewing Mr. David Howard on the 13th of December 2020 through the program of Zoom. Now let's get right into the interview questions.
Or growing up, you said you lived with your mother while your father was in the army, correct?
Right.
Can you describe how it felt growing up with a single mother type situation?
Well, it's like I said, I lived with my mother, but my we lived in my aunt's flat in Cudahy in the back room. And so we didn't have too much access to the rest of the house. I mean, we weren't restricted, but I mean, we were just living in the back room. And I remember in the living room, they had a radio on, or we had a radio on, and I was listening to music from Hawaii. And it was sun coming through the light, through the windows, and then there was kind of dust in the air, and they were just floating around, and it was really rather pleasant. But other than that, well, I also from there I went to school from there, and that's where I went to school in Cudahy, and that was Kosciuszko School again, and it was, well, we just were waiting around for my father to get back or whatever happened. And I think from there we had taken train trips down to Great Lakes to see him when he was in boot camp. But it wasn't too bad. And I seem to recall having a toy gun on the windowsill of the bathroom, and I pushed it out to see what would happen, and it fell down on the sidewalk and it broke. So I found out that that would break.
You also had mentioned that your mother had left the Christmas tree up all year until your dad came home. Can you give us more of an insight or a backstory as to why she did that?
It was at the end of the war, I think it was 1945, and my dad hadn't come home. So we put the tree up, and we were living on 15th Place, south of uh, Forest Home Avenue, in the Polish flat. So she put the tree up, and then, of course, she thought, well, she'll just keep it up till my dad gets home so he can see the tree, have something nice to look at when he gets home.
So it was more of like this gesture for him.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
The other thing I'd like to mention is I was just looking at some of the photos, and we have a photo of my mother and then my mother and me, and but the thing that got me was in those days you take a black and white photo and they colorize it, and that's how you got color on it, sort of painted it on.
Yes. Um, did you grow up in a diverse community, and what was the schooling like for you in those communities?
Well, like I said, I had 22 schools, and yeah, I just kept moving around. Now, I didn't have that many when I was a kid. It was between Cudahy and Milwaukee. I didn't go to South Milwaukee, so, but I just kept moving around, and it usually was, most of my schools were around National Avenue and 6th Street, so we had a lot of different kids around there. When I, uh, before the Second World War, I went to visit my aunt, and I was about 4 years old, something like that, 5. And so I went to visit my aunt for a couple of days. So my friend Martinez come over, and he wanted to play ball with me. So I wasn't there. So then my dad went out and played ball with him, to catch with him. And it was just one of those things that I came home and my mother told me about it. Oh, okay. But like in View School, as far as diversity, they claimed that we had 11 different nationalities going to that school. And they have just about the same thing online now. I don't know, they didn't change it or what. I don't know. But like I said, we moved around and I didn't care who the heck I was hanging out with, except, well, my friend Ayala, he had a tavern. I had 3 friends that had taverns. Well, their families had taverns. Didn't benefit me in any way as far as liquor, but I go over there a couple times and visit them, look at the bar.
Was
You
that
said
tavern
that
located in Milwaukee?
Pardon?
Was that tavern located here in Milwaukee?
Yeah, that's on Second Street north of National. And then my other friend his uncle had a bar, and that was on 6th Street north of National. And another friend had one, I think it was on National Avenue, 8th and National. Not that I cultivated those particular kind of people.
you said that you had lived in Cudahy, South Milwaukee, and Walker's Point. Was there a noticeable cultural difference in any of those communities?
No, not that I know of. Everybody's all the same to me.
Did you feel safe in those communities?
Yeah, here and there, people from, not very much, but people from outside Milwaukee County are kind of hesitant to come into Milwaukee. But for the people in Milwaukee, we just walk around and we don't care where we're going.
Are those communities that you think you would have raised your children in?
What was that?
Are those communities that you think you would want to raise your children in?
It's not racist. It's fear. You don't go with any place. Just like I didn't go out at night where the bars were. You don't push your luck.
What were some things that you would change to make those communities safer, in your opinion?
More police, I guess. That's all you can do. I mean, you can't have social workers taking the place of police, and police aren't social workers either. But if you have a neutral attitude to each other, that's just the benefit of everybody can get along then.
In all those communities that you talked about and lived in, how were they? Was it just mostly a group of strangers, or was it people you knew, like friends and family? Can you tell us more about that?
I mean, you had friends from school and you had friends from work, and mostly you're just concentrating on schoolwork and you're concentrating on work. Like my dad with my family and friends, he just would talk mostly about work. And of course, listening to that, I learned a lot. And it was mostly about work because that's the main thing that you're interested in.
What were your father's background, as in, what were his what was his work? Where did he work? And what was his most recognizable work that you know?
Well, he spent the most time in American Motors at 8 years, but he worked at Patrick Cudahy plant in Cudahy. And when I was on 15th place, I remember that he was saving up his money and he got himself a, sheepskin vest so he wouldn't be that cold at work, because they mostly you keep everything cold, you can't have anything spoil. And of course, when he worked at body work, he he had various places, but I guess he worked at about 3 different body shops. And one time he came home on a motorcycle, 3-wheel motorcycle, took me for a ride. Of course, I was kind of young. And in those days, when I lived on 15th Place, there weren't a lot of cars around. My dad was one of the few people that had a car. And of course, it was always used car.
During in between any of those jobs of his, do you remember during what period did he start having his history with the military?
I don't remember what he was working at. He was, I don't remember what he was working at when he joined the military, but he must have not had a wonderful, good job because when the war was declared, he joined the Navy. And I asked him why he joined the Navy, and he said, well, they eat the best, so I figured I'd go with that.
And was he, how many terms or how many tours did he serve in the Navy?
Well, in those days, they were just in the Navy. That's it. He wasn't a tour. Maybe different areas of where you were placed, but he was in the Pacific, and that's the only place that I know of that he went to. And he was stationed in San Diego, and that's the only place I remember, San Diego. That was Naval Yard. And he went to, what's that, Colorado? I know there's a fancy place, fancy motel in Colorado. I mean, in San Diego. Coronado Hotel, that's why. That's a hell of a fancy place. I thought it was only for officers, but he went there too.
Bringing it back to school, out of everyone that you had went to school with, is there anyone that you still keep in touch with till this day?
No, not really. Everybody's kind of dispersed, even from Boys Tech. From grade school, I ran in one woman that worked at Milwaukee County, and we run into each other here and there at the Christmas parties. And that was the only one that I noticed. Like my dad, when I was on 5th Street, we were walking down the street and there was a guy across the street, and my dad yelled out, "Hey, you still alive?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I see you're still alive." I don't think hardly anybody from Boys Tech stayed together. I mean, the Monreals, I ran across one brother running a restaurant, but he didn't know me and I hardly knew him. I knew his brother, and that's all.
Do you have any memories about the Milwaukee Blizzard of 1947?
Well, 1947 was the big snow as far as I'm concerned. And I don't remember how high it was. It probably was 18 inches, but everything was shut down, and the people, the city didn't have the equipment it has now. And when I looked out I was in the Polish flat, so we had to walk up the stairs, open up the door, and luckily work came in, so we had to dig our way out of there. And then the really amazing thing was all the people got out in the street and started shoveling the street. And that was pretty neat to me. And of course, that area was after the war, but we were there a year before the war ended, I think, because I remember walking down the street and seeing the small flags with either blue stars or gold stars on them in the windows. And it was, so that was, it kind of fixes it to 1945, 44, 45. But so we had gotten out of my aunt's place and got over there. And then,
What
of
do
course,
those
my mother tried to get a loan for buying a house, but during the war, they wouldn't give you a loan because your husband could be dead the next day. So they didn't want to give her a loan.
what did those blue and gold stars signify on the windows?
Well, the blue stars were that you had somebody in the war, and the gold was when you had somebody that died in the war.
Was there a significant amount of those in your community?
Well, I didn't see too many of them. There were maybe 4 or 5 in about 3-block area. I don't know. I wasn't paying too much attention, mostly on my block. Mostly you just walk around your block, that's all. Till she got older, and then I started walking all over the place.
Tracking back a little bit to the blizzard, do you remember if that was a one-day event or how long did that event last?
Well, it probably was 6 or 7 hours, but it came down pretty hard. And I forgot how long it took before the streetcars were running, but it was a while. Like I said, well, even I can't really believe it, but when I lived there in 45 or something, we still had some horse-drawn garbage trucks, and then we still had peddlers that had horse-drawn carts. And I remember a knife sharpener. I mean, even then it was strange to me. And they didn't come along on a regular basis. I mean, it was just here and there. And also, boy, I don't remember if the ice truck was, I think the ice truck was a truck, not a horse-drawn. Yeah, that's again where it seemed like there's always transitions between things. Like when I lived there, the bathroom had a toilet, but later on they brought in a real toilet. And I think, well, how the heck, what was it? What kind of a toilet was that? It wasn't an outhouse, but it wasn't, so it was there again. And then when we lived on, when I bought my first house on 25th Street, I bought an old house and it had gas lights in it. They didn't work, but they were still there. It was really odd.
Do you think it was bad plumbing, or do you think that the Milwaukee water municipal system was just bad? Because we recall you saying in the pre-interview that you used to stand or sit at your window as a child and watch rats running from sewer to sewer.
Oh, that was from across the street from Boys Tech, and we lived in a mansion. Of course, it wasn't a mansion then. It was a red brick building, but I say it's a mansion because each flat had a fireplace in the front. Now, I don't remember if it was real or not, but it must have been because in those days they didn't have any fake things. And so, like I said, when I looked out the window and it was raining, the rats would run from one side of the street to the other side, from one sewer to the other. And I was on the second floor, and that was pretty high up. So they must have been pretty big. And I remember my dad, one time, my dog was barking, and he was, then my dad went into the kitchen, and there was a rat in there, so he tried to kill it with a broom's handle. And I don't remember what happened, but he must have got it out because nobody got bit.
That was on the second floor. Did they come up through the plumbing, through the toilet? Where do you think they came up from?
And anything could have come up the porch for all I know. I mean, rats get around a lot. And it was a big one. It was, as I recall, it was a big one. And of course, I was 4 or 5 then. I say that maybe it was 3, but it couldn't have been. Must have been, yeah, 4 or 5, something like that. I was 4 o'clock. I was 4 years. I know I was 4 years old when I heard that. Went into the living room, and on the mantle was our radio, and on the radio, the guy says, "We interrupt the story program to bring you news that Pearl Harbor was attacked." And I had a shiver down my back. I was 4 years old. I don't know if it was the way he said it or if I realized what was going on, but I wasn't into maps then as I am now, so I couldn't have known where it was. But then, later on, learned about my uncle. Well, I always knew about my uncle was in the service, so anyways.
Do you remember how your parents reacted to Pearl Harbor?
No, I actually don't. I mean, I don't remember that. They didn't say anything. That's all, the only thing I remember. So
Did
I don't
Pearl
remember
Harbor,
people talking about it, or I guess I was too small to have anybody talk to me about it or even overhear it.
did Pearl Harbor play the same effect that 9/11 did on the community?
Oh, Pearl Harbor was a lot worse because you just killed a lot of military people. I mean, killing people with money doesn't really matter that much. It's when you kill people, especially the ones that are going to defend you. So we were missing 2,000 of our people that were in defense, plus all of our equipment that we had. So that was, and also we had less people in the country. So you got to play percentages, percentage hurt there and compared to percentage now, just like the Civil War, where there was less people fighting, but the percentage of people fighting in the Civil War was tremendous compared to any other war as far as percentages.
At 4 years old, when you first heard the news, did you understand the true extents of what that meant for the country?
Not that I know of. I don't remember that. And matter of fact, you're used to TV, you're used to movies. Well, not movies, but mostly TV. But in those days, even after you started learning about it, as far as I'm concerned, you learned about it really from newsreels, Pathé News and stuff. When you went to a movie house, they'd have newsreels. That's where you learned about it, and they'd show you moving pictures and stuff about the war. So that's actually what really got to you, was that, not anything else. Of course, we had radio, but I don't remember hearing stuff on the radio about it. But like, I was still young. I don't know, after the end of the war, let's say it's 41 is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Must have been 8 when the war was over. So I didn't, maybe you can remember back how smart you were, but I don't remember much.
In the pre-interview, you had mentioned that you had lived in 22 different homes. Did that play any effect on you as you grew into your adulthood?
Oh, it must have, but mostly it was about schools. Every time you change schools, it rips your guts out. You're going to a new school, you don't know any of the kids and how to get there and everything else and how to fit in. And I remember going to Cudahy, and the one thing I remember, and I'm not going to remember real good, was the different way they did their numbers, the way they drew their numbers. And I thought, that's strange. And then, of course, because I did that, I think I was put back 1 year because I changed schools. Maybe it was in between schools or in between semesters. So I got put back 1 year. So I didn't graduate when I was 18. I graduated when I was 19. It wasn't because I was stupid. At least that's what I think.
Also,
I'm not stupid, am I? She said I wasn't stupid.
no, you're
Of
not.
course, I pay her bills.
Yes. During those times that you moved 22 times, were they around around about the same area, or was it completely different areas of Milwaukee?
Oh, it's mostly around the south side of Milwaukee. I was born in Cudahy. I lived with my aunt in Cudahy, and I lived in South Milwaukee once, but mostly around. Well, also I lived in St. Francis also, and but mostly around the south side of Milwaukee. Matter of fact, on 15th Place, I lived on Rogers between 15th and 15th Place and 15th Street. So that's twice there, and just goes on and on. I got a whole list. Just like I had 22 cars between my wife and myself. Usually bought used cars, so I've used a lot of transmissions, and the one that we got with this Fusion is one of those dials, and I don't really like that one.
Do you remember what was your reaction to the Kennedy assassination?
Well, at first I didn't believe it because I was working at American Motors, and those guys screw around a lot. And for about 10 minutes, I didn't really think that happened. And then it happened, and then they went on in the news a lot about that, and people talked about that, and so many people had theories about it, and they didn't trust anything that was going on. And a lot of people talked about that, and even when I was at the end of the county, there was a couple of guys that still thought there was some other kind of conspiracy in there. And it could have been. Who knows? A lot of things happen. You don't know what's going on.
Do you remember about how long the conversation kept going for the assassination?
Oh, it's hard. Was maybe 2 years. I mean, they really talked about it. I mean, it was a shock. But as far as disinformation, and it isn't intentional. When I watched the movie Viva Zapata, they had him, well, this one general put one of his regiments in jeopardy, and they got assassinated by Zapata's group. So then Zapata trusted this guy, so he went in alone into a building, which was really a courtyard, and he was going to meet the general, and the general had all his guys there, and they shot him full of holes. Well, about 2 years ago, I was looking at online, and I found out that Amelia Zapata was shot at home. It was sort of an assassination, but it wasn't at any building or something like that. It was like his home. So things, you can't trust anything. You got to make sure, you got to check and recheck and check again. People lie and they don't even know they're lying.
Did the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel publish anything during the assassination?
Oh yeah, sure, a lot of stuff, man. And of course, the journal was something to read then. Not like now. It's got all this other information. You probably don't really realize only having one. Well, we had two papers, the Journal and the Sentinel, and the Journal was always a nicer one, and the Sentinel was, they give you the hard facts and a little sensation, but you had at least two plus some small things which we never read until the last 20 years, and then they started going away. But you're lucky you got all this information. Of course, well, I shouldn't really get into this. There's an awful lot of lying going on. Anyways, like I had at the county, a guy got a job, and he was a former policeman. And we'd ask him about the politicians, and all he'd say was, "They're all crooks. They're all crooks."
Why would he be? What was the reason he was saying that?
Well, he was a former cop. He knew some of them.
Yeah.
At Boyd's Tech, you were majorly studying aeronautics. Was this a subject that you had enjoyed?
Well, my mother liked aeronautics. When I was in living with my aunt in the back room, my mother and I would be in bed, and she'd tell me like fractured fairy tales, and a lot of stuff was like airplanes, and you're flying an airplane, and the seat would eject you out into the atmosphere, stuff like that. And it's supposed to be funny. Well, I was liked aeronautics, and my great uncle, no, my great uncle, Alex, he was a blacksmith, and he helped build the Lawson airplane in South Milwaukee. And you don't hardly hear anything about the Lawson airplane, but he did some work on that. But anyways, I liked it, and I thought my friend would liked it too, but he went into the Air Force and I stayed at school. But it was very interesting, and even to the point where they had a link trainer, which teaches you night flying. Well, it gives you an inkling of it. So I must have had about a half hour in there. And then it was, we had engines in order to graduate, you got to take an engine apart and put it together and make it run with a prop on it. And we had a opposed engine, four-cylinder opposed engine. And we had to take it apart and put it together. It was in teams. I think there were 6 guys in a team. And we had engines up to, I think it's 24. I can't find a 24 cylinder radial engine, but one of the things with a radial engine was the exterior of a cylinder goes over the piston, and it goes along 2 bolts, and you put the nuts, washers and nuts on there. And the odd thing about that is, once the nut is on there tight, they got a hole in the bolt, and you have to put wires in there so that the engine doesn't come apart on you. And then, of course, later we had a 2-engine Cessna with fabric, and then we were supposed to cut holes in it and patch them with fabric and glue it together with dope, which is a paint. And then later on with the F-80 came in, and I thought it was F-80. This other guy that I know that went there before me swears it was a F-84 jet engine, jet plane, both of them. And so they'd have us put holes in the plane and then patch it up with rivets. And of course, you learn everything else about aeronautics and navigation and takeoff and all that sort of stuff. But I didn't have any actual experience flying until I took flying lessons when I was at American Motors, and I had 9 hours of flying lessons. And that was really interesting. And within 9 hours, the guy says, well, I could solo. But the next thing he says, well, do you have your medical? So then I had it done for the medical. It took me 6 weeks to get that. And for some reason, I lost interest or some damn thing. I don't know. But I liked flying. That was really amazing.
Was that class at Boys Tech, was it a class for juniors and seniors? Or was it for everyone that wanted to take it?
I think it started at sophomore and went to junior. And along with that, then you had another subject. So I took drafting. In first year at Kosciuszko, which is on Whitnall Avenue, that's where you had at least 6 in 1 year of classes that were different classes. And one was machine shop, auto shop, electrical, drafting, printing. Yeah, printing also. And it's odd that you take this class and you learn, well, you had to learn the old stuff, which was setting type out of boxes, and then you progress. But that got me into all kinds of other stuff, and I became a secretary, and I got into editor of I guess a magazine, and this was only in school though. And well, when I went to the county, I was editor for the engineering department too. So one thing progresses to the other. Just like when I was at View School, I was projectionist for 8mm. We'd show movies, and I'd alternate with that. Well, when I went to the Army, one of my 2-week stints, you could choose something to learn. And one of the things I learned was I took a 40-hour course in being a projectionist. It went from overhead slides to 16mm projections. And that was really interesting. It was neat.
So all of your jobs had some
Yeah.
type of connection with each other?
Pardon?
All of your jobs that you took, they had some type of relation or connection to each other?
Yeah, I suppose everything's connected. Just like when you go to school, whether it's grade school or high school or college, everything is a progression, and they want you to be a graduate of a college. Well, what they really want you to do is be able to do all kinds of stuff to go into anything, and then they teach you what you should do for their job in particular. But it's all this progression. It's just like, I mean, I never thought that I'd be into being a draftsman, and but there I was in high school. Well, in grade school, we could choose. I took drawing maps. Well, at least one map. And in high school, I went into drafting, and of course that was mechanical drafting, and that was because everything is related to mechanics. So I didn't think that I'd be into, well, when I went to George Meyer, for drafting. They got me into plant layout, which I never thought of. And so that was when I was going to MATC. And so that was mechanical. But it was plant layout, which you get into structures have to be able to hold your equipment. And usually they put it on the ground. And when I went to MATC during that time, and I became a mechanical editor of the magazine, and then the editor-in-chief. And for the mechanical, I decided, well, I'd ask Meyer whether I could do a piece on their entire line. So they said, okay. So I wrote it up and submitted it. MAT said, okay, but then I had to submit it to George Meyer's lawyers to find out if they would prove it. And they did. So there I was doing that. And I mean, it isn't a real direct line from setting type. Just like when I was in the county drawing, and we wouldn't just draw stuff, it was a lot of graphics. So when I started going out with my wife, I found out that she was into graphics over at Wisconsin Bank. And of all things, one of the things she did was she ran a linotype.
No.
What was that?
Verotype.
Verotype, which is something like linotype, but a Verotype machine. And I knew what she was doing. And then she knew what I was doing, because I don't know, maybe you should put your hands over your ears, but I was a stripper for the county. That means that we had milers that we drew on with ink. And so we type up all the things that we wanted to put on MacTac, which is a paper, and you take the paper off the plastic off the paper, and then you put it in strips onto the mylar where you want to put it. So we were strippers. We weren't very sexy though. Well, I don't know. That's just my opinion. If you asked a girl, we could be rather sexy.
I remember that you had mentioned that you were always a car guy, that you and your wife had owned a total of 22 different cars. Did it serve as a way to get away from everything that was happening in your life?
No, that didn't. I mean, driving is, do you drive?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, driving is, you're in your own world and you can control everything, and it's really pleasant. But you have time to think about stuff, and at times you can get away from stuff, but it isn't really an escape. It's a real pleasure. And I like driving.
So for you, it was like another hobby in a way.
Oh yeah, it's hobby. And I even took a course at MATC in riding a motorcycle. And they gave us 100cc Yamahas, and then other people could have their own cycles. So at the end, we're supposed to go up this hill and go up and down the hill. So this one guy gunned his engine, and it flipped on him, and it landed on him. And we walked up there and we're looking at him, and this one girl walks up and she says, "Well, I guess you didn't pass."
Would you have consider yourself a car enthusiast or collector?
Oh yeah, but well, not a collector, but enthusiast. I had a very bad shock once, twice, maybe 3 times. Used to go to a drive-in, and you go there and with your cars, and everybody's with your cars. And the first time I saw somebody put their kid on top of their car, I almost went through the roof. I mean, holy crap, you're gonna scratch the car. Not that I
See,
didn't have rusty cars, but to do it on purpose.
so you were really into the cars then, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sometimes I'd go to a car dealer and I'd be talking to him, and the car guy that was selling the car didn't know much about cars. I mean, you ask him sometimes, oh, I don't know. It was really weird. Here they're selling cars and they don't know anything about cars. But on the other hand, when I was at the county as in the engineering drafting department, most of the guys there were into cars and classic cars. So I learned a lot about classic cars, and of course I couldn't afford them, but that was okay. But you learn a lot, and then you appreciate cars. And do you drive with your radio on?
Yes, we do.
Well, I don't drive with my radio on. I listen to the car because I want to know if that car is going to break down. You listen to the car and maybe something will, you catch something that shouldn't be. Not that I'm admonishing you at all. I shouldn't be telling. I'm not your dad.
Did you have a favorite car or model or company?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I had some tremendous cars. The one I really liked was my 57 Oldsmobile 88 hardtop. That was fantastic car. But even if I had a really good looking, fantastic car, even a boat-tailed speedster, I still nowadays want backup camera and backup sensors. Those are really neat things.
I
But
agree with you on that.
there was one time, you may not know what this is, but one of my cars got injured. So I took it to a off ship body shop to get repaired. And they were supposed to give you a loaner. Well, this guy said he didn't have a loaner then. And at that time, I really needed a loaner. So I kept pushing him. So this guy says, well, why don't you give him yours? So he gave me his, and it was a Mark IV, which means it's a Lincoln Continental Mark IV. That was the fanciest car I've ever been driving.
Back then, was there when you would go to car dealerships, did you ever get any cars for a steal from people that didn't know so much about them?
No, when I do deals, I try and make sure that I don't get stuck more than I should. I always figure somebody's going to screw me. But I bought a car for $75. That's 1960 Buick Electra. And I bought it for my wife. And it was a fantastic car. And the reason I got rid of it was they wanted I needed the windshield wipers repaired, and they were going to charge me $75. And I thought, well, I bought it for $75, so I should get rid of it. But that was a hell of a car. And not only that, this car would stop every once in a while. And I took it back to the Buick dealer, and they didn't know what was going on, and back and forth. And this guy across the street, I was talking to him, and he says, well, I know about it. I used to work for Buick, and I can fix it. And I said, well, okay, well, how much? And he says, $5. So I gave him $5. And he put in a fuse. And the Buick dealer, people didn't even know what the heck it was, what was happening with it. You know, what the heck? So no matter how good these people are, there's always something you don't know. Just like when I was driving one of my caravans from the doctor's office home, and all the darn lights started flashing all over. I mean, all the lights were going, and I couldn't turn it off. So I went to Farm and Fleet, and they said, "Well, you're lucky. We got a guy that works for Dodge." And he came over, he said, "Oh yeah, I know," and he fixed it. But I'd never seen anything like that. Lights flashing, you know. Damn, that was something else.
Was this Buick car dealer still around at this time?
No, I think that was in South Milwaukee. I thought, or maybe it was, well, maybe it wasn't. Well, I bought it from, I thought it was Best Dealership, which isn't Buick, but I took it to a Buick dealer. I don't know where it was. I don't recall. But anyways, they couldn't fix it. And it was really something. Not, I'm going to jump again, but I just, my son-in-law, Cliff, I mean, my grandson's Cliff, I gave him for $10 my Mariner, and he had it cracked it up. Somebody ran into him, I guess. So the place we took it to was Westway Auto, which is off Greenfield and 62nd Street. Well, I found out that that place was a Packard dealership at one time originally, and then it changed to AMC, and now this guy's got part of it. They broke it up into 3 parts, but going into that, I looked on the wall, on one of the walls, and there was all these old switches and knobs. And I went into him and I says, "What the heck is all that?" And he says, "Well, it was a Packard dealer. That's where it's from."
When did your fascination really start about these cars?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's, as you probably know, there are beautiful things in the world. Some of them are cars, some of them are boats, some of them are airplanes, some of them are women. So, and even some of them are guns. Some guns are ugly, but some are nice. So it's all a matter of how you like them, and it's just like a horse. It gets you from one place to another. Horses are nice looking too. I'm into art, you know. Not much.
During the Prince review, you had also mentioned that you worked at American Motors. How would you describe your day-to-day life working as an employee there?
Well, it was okay once you get started. The first 3 months, you're working at a lower pay, and then after the 3rd month, you get full pay. And then I did that, and some older guy come up to me and said, "We fought and fought for all that money, and then you get it in 3 months." But hang on. So once I got there, they had me, and you always start out small. They had me taping holes in the bodies of cars. When American Motor, well, the plant on Capitol, they don't put any engines or undercarriage on it, but they put everything else on it. So the bodies come in from the Bud company on flat cars. They send this up to the 5th floor, and they start welding parts on, and the other parts are fabricated on the 1st floor, which is like a ground floor, And I was down there a couple times, and they got these drivable trucks with forklifts running around, and they got on a post at the corners, they'd have mirrors so that these truck drivers could see somebody coming here or going there. And this one guy was sitting there, and he was kind of heavy set, and he had a pile of flat pieces of metal, and he'd take it with one hand and he put it into the press, he'd press it, and then take the other hand and put it on a pile. And he just sat there and did this. And about 2 years later, I saw in a paper that some guy, sheets of steel had come off and killed him. So I don't know if it was this guy, but boy, that was a dangerous job. I used to be a pressman at A.O. Smith, 6-man press for a while. And one time I almost left my hand in and scared the living hell out of me. But anyways, when everything gets welded on the 5th floor, then it snakes its way down through the floor to the trim line, which is the 4th and 3rd floor. And that's where I usually work. And I work, like I said, first thing was duct tape, and then I worked putting door handles on all the way around the car. And I noticed that the door handles at that time were coming from Chrysler, and Chrysler had got them from Mexico. And another one was putting side windows together offline, and they go into a metal retainer so that the retainer can go into the door and then hook onto the door handle. And then of course, when it starts up at the beginning of a year, you start low, which is you start maybe a sweeper, and then you progress up to a trucker. A trucker is a guy, what the body rides on is a truck. It's got 4 wheels, and you put the body on there, and they have various lines, and you got to go from one line to another line, and then to take the body to and from those lines, that would be a trucker. And then I was a side window installer. You'd have to climb into the body, sit on a stool, and put the window in that I did put together before. And then I installed front and back windows by getting inside the body and pulling string that's around the edges of the window. And as they push it down toward the body to get it in, you pull the string so that what you might call rubber around the window seals around the window frame. And then I was installed heater motors, which you have to climb into the body and put the heater in, screw that in. And then on the other side, and also I installed the air conditioning motors, which was a large air conditioner. You put that in, and it's got hoses, and you have to put the hoses through the wall, and then you screw it in. And then I did the other side, was you get inside the wheel, the engine compartment, sit on a stool, and you install the heater motors and the air conditioning motors from the other side, which is 2 different jobs. And then I installed hood liners, which was you spray the liner with glue, and then you get in the car and then put it into the top of the car, and also headliners I was talking about. Then there's also the hood liners, which is the same thing. And one of the I was also the UAW union steward for the Local 75 at that time. And during the time I was at AMC, I joined the Army Reserves. And I also had a part-time job as Pinkerton officer, and also a part-time job at Civil Police, patrolman. But one of the interesting things about American Motors was I was really surprised when the cops would walk up the line and they'd take somebody off the line and arrest them. Not for what they were doing inside American Motors. It was, they probably had an arrest warrant for them. And then when we walked, during lunch, we'd run down the stairs, whether it's from the 4th or 3rd floor, across the street to the tavern restaurant. And I was going to the restaurant. I emphasize I was going to the restaurant. But as I passed the bar, they'd have setups for these guys. And they'd have a shot of whiskey, they'd have a glass of wine, and a glass of beer. And then those guys would go back to work. So not only I worked there, but my dad worked there, my cousin's husband worked there, my wife's brother-in-law worked there, and also his brother. And another thing that happened, which was kind of interesting, when in the winter, when you're in their parking lot for the employees, they'd have a truck going around and they'd have a 24-volt battery and they'd start your car for you. So they'd help you that way.
During your years working there, what positions did you hold as an employee? How many positions were you promoted to?
I didn't get promoted to anything. It was just on the line. We all got paid the same thing. There was the foreman was the next highest, and I don't know what else above that was. We'd have people come down from there's a word for it. They'd time the jobs and stuff, and they'd come down with the timekeeper, but it wasn't exactly that. And they'd time your job so that they could see if they put more stuff on you. That's another thing where at American Motors, you go from a sweeper and then you go another couple jobs, and then you go to the line. But the line would start at about 20 cars an hour. And at the end, at full production, it was 40 cars an hour. So for a time, you'd do your job, and it'd be every 3rd car, and then it'd be every 2nd car, and then sometimes, well, every 3rd, every car that comes in, then they go to every 2 cars, and then every 3 cars, depending on how fast it is. And then your job would you wouldn't be putting as many things on as normally. Another thing was, to give you a little insight into what was going on, was I noticed during the years I was there, older guys would get harassed and on the line, and it was like they were harassing them so they'd quit, so they wouldn't get their pension. And the guys on the line would be doing it. It wouldn't be this, like the foreman or something like that. It would be other people. It's just that I got that feeling.
So it was the younger guys kind of picking at the older guys on the line?
I think there was a little of that. Yeah, there's always somebody wanting to be better than you, always somebody, they want to show off what they're doing. Of course, you don't do that, right?
No.
You haven't experienced that. That's another thing that I thought, that going from American Motors, and I've been other places, going from that to a draftsman would be a higher class people. Well, they are, but there's always that competition between guys and women. Oh, the other thing was during maybe the 5th or 6th year that I was there, they brought women on the line. And then I started hearing things about men and women messing around. I didn't hear anybody getting fired, but I heard those, but I didn't see it. It's just that they were messing around sexually with each other. Not all of them.
Were your experiences at American Motors similar to A.O. Smith?
Yeah, it was pretty much like A.O. Smith. I mean, I got hired as a hookup man, which meant that I put fenders on hooks and they went down through the shop and they got sprayed with undercoating. And that's after they probably got out of the presses. And my job, that was a constant job, it was sort of like the people that were on this job would be taken off and shipped to other jobs. And that's how I got into the other jobs. And so we'd have to put bolts, nuts and bolts together on, they could have been A-frames or something like that for cars and that. Well, there was a lot of goofing around with metal and it gets into your skin and you'd have to go to the nurse and get it taken out sometimes. Like AMC, they had actual doctor come in on them Wednesdays, but anything that happened to you, you could go down to the nurse. And same with A.O. Smith. And I didn't like being cut up. And then I was hookup man for a crane, and which was kind of, I kept thinking, well, it's a dangerous job. If you do it right, it isn't bad, but it's a dangerous job, that end. But like my grandfather, he lost his life, got electrocuted on top of a crane and when he worked for Laddish. That's why my grandmother turned her place into a rooming house. And that's how we ended up in one room in her house when I got born. And so and then of course it was the money actually that got me from there. I was working like $2 and something. I remember my good job I started at American Motors was $3.75 an hour. So that was probably only making $2.50 at A.O. Smith. But, and then of course they had a Aeronautics division at A.O. Smith. And I wanted to get in there. I don't know what it would have been, but I would have liked to do that. But I didn't, because I went to American Motors.
Coming back to aeronautics, where did you begin to take your flying lessons?
That was over at Rainbow Airport. That's on 76 south of Rawson Avenue. And I got somewhere. Oh, I can't find it now. Well, I don't know where it is. Oh, it is school. Yeah, school. Oh yeah, yeah. I put it in with schooling. Well, that was schooling. Yeah, it was 76th Street on Ryan Road. Yeah, Ryan Road, not Rawson Avenue. Geez. And so the first hour I took, and it's kind of interesting. First hour I took was introduction to the Aeroconda Champion airplane. The second hour was turns, climbs, and glides. And then the third hour was turns, corner flying glide, square pattern, and climbs. Corner flying, well, you fly in a corner and there's a pattern that you have before you land, and it's in a square, and it's about 400 feet by 400 feet by 400 feet. And you get into this pattern and you get in alignment with the runway, and then you come down when you're 400 feet away from the runway in a glide, well, not a glide, but under power. And then the fourth hour was turns, stalls, corners, and slips. And slip is when you slip down, you lower the wing and you slip down into your level flying. Then our fourth hour is power off, stalls, slips, turns, slow flight, which is different. And then 6th hour is takeoffs and landings, 7th hour takeoffs, landings under gusty and crosswinds. And then there's takeoffs and landings, and then the last hour was takeoffs, landings, gusty crosswinds. And then that was when they told me I could solo. You know, the most important thing about driving a car?
What's that?
Stopping it. The most important thing about flying is stopping it before you're even taxiing, how to stop it. And the second thing is landing. And the third thing is taking off. You don't know how to land, you don't know how to go up.
For you, how did it feel to be training as a pilot for 9 hours? Like, did you ever have any thoughts about backing out and not continuing to pursue that position?
Not when I was doing it. The first hour, oh, that's another thing. The first hour, you're getting used to the Anaconda. Well, you were flying. And I threw up. I really started throwing up. I was so embarrassed. And I thought, oh, I can handle this. Well, he was starting to do eights and stuff, not flipping, but doing eights in the air at level. And just that, I mean, I'm used to roller coasters, but I threw up. But it was really a fantastic, I'll take a drink like that one guy. And then he lost his bid for the election. But it was like everything, it was like natural. I'm afraid of heights, but when I'm in the airplane, I don't care. And I'm like an angel. No, I'm not an angel. Forget that. But anyways, it was really something. If you get a chance to take a discovery flight, do it, because you get a hold of this. Well, it's not a stick anymore. It's a wheel, and you actually fly. They don't let you land. That's another thing, but you can fly, and it's really neat. And that's I guess I did take a discovery flight before I got to that point, before I took the lessons, but it's really neat. And then the first time you get a crosswind, and then you have to slip in to get down to a lower position where you can land it properly, and it actually works. And it's like you get the feel of you're one with the plane. It's really a neat feeling. And it's just, and all this 3 years that I put in aeronautics at high school, I mean, all the work with the engines, and you have to learn navigation and stuff, and there I was flying. It was really fantastic. Not only that, I make sure that all my daughters and my granddaughter and my grandson and that go up and take a flight, because that is really fantastic. course, my dad used to say, rich people have more of a chance of dying because they can do more, especially flying. But I liked it.
So for someone that's afraid, so for you that you're afraid of heights and that you often threw up, how long did it take for you to get used to it?
Well, the next time was okay. It was fine. I guess maybe because I was actually doing something by myself, concentrating on something else. But after that, I was okay. And then the other day, or about 2 years ago, I ran across something, and it was a CDs that had films from the Second World War, and they were how instructing pilots that were already pilots on checking out on airplanes. And some of the planes were the P-38 Lightning, the P-39 Aero Cobra, the P-40 Warhawk, the P-47 Thunderbolt, P-61 Black Widow, and the ME-262 German jet. And they were studying the German jet because that was the most advanced plane then that they knew of. But I mean, it's different than learning how to fly a plane. It's something like when I was checking out on the Aeroconda, you learn about it, and you're also learning how to take off. But each plane is different, and this thing showed you when to put the power on, when to pull the stick back, how to land it, and there's all kinds of tricks to each plane. You have to learn them. It was really neat.
Have you ever considered connecting your aeronautics education with the military? Did you ever consider joining the Air Force?
Oh yeah, that's a story. Well, I was at American Motors when I got drafted. So I really didn't want to. My friend was in the Air Force, and I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to go for 4 years, and I didn't want to leave American Motors. And it's kind of hard getting jobs, and so I went through, looked at the Marines, and at the time you had to be a former Marine in order to be a reserve Marine. And the Navy, I think, was 6 years in reserves, and the not the Coast Guard, but National Guard was 8 years, but the Army was 6 years. So I figured, well, I'll go to that. So I had to go to take a physical for the draft. And then the next week I had to take a physical for the reserves. And both times I got blood taken out of them. I got weaker and weaker. This one guy, I have small veins, and it's hard to get my blood out of me. I'm not a turnip. So I was sitting there, and they were going to take blood out of me, but they couldn't find my vein. And this big sergeant come over and held me down while they searched for my vein. I didn't like that much. It was something like when I had a toothache in the Army, and the guy was working on my tooth, and I was going to scream bloody murder. And then I noticed that he had a stripe down his leg, and I knew it was an officer, and you don't mess with an officer. But that's another story.
While serving your time in the military, what exactly did you do?
Well, I got first thing was I got hired as an armorer, but I had to go to basic training, and in basic training you go through the regular training. And then after that, they put me as a OJT cook. So I did cooking there, and I learned that if you take lemon peels and coffee grounds and you cook them overnight, you can take them outside and you can clean the sidewalk with them. And also the most impressive was not then, but later on, we were cooking for Thanksgiving and cooking about 20 turkeys, and that was a big project. But anyways, when I got out of there, then I went back to being an armorer, which was taking care of all the small arms, plus a BAR and a mortar and a 30 caliber machine gun and a bazooka. But I didn't have to do too much with that. So what they had me do was help with supply and some office work. Well, about 5 years into it, 3 years into it, the American Motors complained that I was going to the reserves too many times at night because I was working nights. So I went to my commanding officer and he said, well, we'll have you go on daytime and do office work in the daytime. So that wasn't exactly true that you're going to keep your job if you're in the reserves, because they were going to fire me if I didn't transfer. So I don't know how, maybe the laws changed or something.
Were you involved in the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War?
Oh yeah, I've been in that for 11 years. 2007. I joined the American Legion in about 2005, and I didn't think that I was a veteran, and I thought I was mixed up with, I thought you had to be in an actual war or in another country. But they sent me a notice that I could get insurance. And of course, they're trying to sell insurance because I was a veteran. And I said, well, geez. So I actually looked it up, and sure enough, I was. And I found out a lot of other stuff. But when I joined the Army, it was 1959, and that was the start of our involvement in Vietnam, but we were only sending observers there. And you got all these stages you go through, and the last stage was 1965, which was full-time, and we went in there full tilt. So I was a veteran several times. So anyways, I only went there to the American Legion several times, and my wife and I and my cousin Diane were at the Remember Our Heritage over at the Veterans Administration at National Avenue, 40-something National. And I went into the library, and the Sons of the Union Veterans had a stall there, and they started talking about it. And then my cousin says, go ahead, Dave, why don't you join? You do like it. Well, I joined them and I forgot about the American Legion. So it's an experience. You put yourself out, and the more you put yourself out, the more reward you get, not financially or anything. It's just, you do things that you don't expect to do. One of the main things was when I was allowed to go to class and learn how to fire a cannon from the Civil War. And I got my wife involved too. So there's 7 positions on a cannon, and you have to get certified in all the positions. And when you go on some of my tours that I went, that I paid for, a couple times they'd allow you to pull the lanyard for a cannon, and you pull it, and that's nice. But to learn actually working and running a cannon, that's something else. Of course, in the morning they give you orientation, and in the orientation, well, they said 1 year before that, they were showing a film, and these guys were reenactors, and they were reenacting, and this one guy's hand got shot off, and he didn't know it at the time, and a couple other people didn't know, and then finally they realized, and so he said, they said, pay attention to what you're doing, and you could get killed, And this was didn't have a round in it. It was only a blank, and he got hurt. But anyways, first thing I was a guide in there, and then I became a junior vice commander, went to the senior vice commander, and then I became a commander of the camp. And then I got to be a patriotic instructor for the department. And we go to various functions. We march, and that's another thing. I was shooting this rifle musket, and that's what they are, 58 caliber rifle musket. And you have to learn to do that. But once I bought a musket, that was a total different experience. You had to get different equipment to clean them, and it's real. Then I got more junk laying around the house. But it's an experience. Oh yeah, then we have national encampments, and once a year, and you go to various places. And the only one I went to was Springfield, Illinois, and we went down there, and we went to see Lincoln's grave, and we went to where he was what the heck is his name? Well, where he worked as a surveyor, that town where he surveyed a lot of it. It was really interesting, and you can go to all kinds of stuff. I went to various places in Wisconsin with the sons, and you're always doing something.
Why exactly did you join the Sons of Union Veterans, and what were some memorable experiences that you had with them?
Well, I joined because I'm into genealogy, and my dad's cousin sent him some genealogy in the form of a letter. And this woman sent her this information, and she said, well, I was researching this, but it's not mine. It's more in line with this Rosemary. But Rosemary sent it to my dad, along with a tintype of my grandfather who was in the Civil War. And so it was all, like I said, written in a letter form. And so I let it sit there for a year before I got to, before I got to take it apart. And I was going along pretty good. Once I take it apart, I worked at the county and we do research, and it's not just because I was there, but it's like second nature to me. And I researched it and I got back further and further. And I'm looking for a tintype that I had. And I got so many things, even the things I set aside was I don't know where it is. Anyways. So anyways, she sent me this. So she sent me this tintype, and the tintype is a picture of a person, and it was my grandfather that was in, and I'm just shortening it, the grandfather in the Civil War. So I looked at it and I couldn't tell whether it was for the North or the South. I looked at the buckle and it had no markings on it. So one time I went to Cuddy Park and they were demonstrating cannon and they were talking about uniforms, and they said, well, the volunteers in the Army they had gray uniforms just like the South. Only the regular Army had blue uniforms. So I pretty much knew that he was in the, not that one, the tintype.
I know, but
It's in there. Take it all out. And so anyways, I knew that I had genealogy going to, here, I was looking for this. That's a tintype. Can you see it?
Yes. Is that anyone familiar or in your family in that picture?
That's my grandfather who was in the Civil War. And so, like I said, it was a gray uniform and I couldn't see the buckle. And so anyways, I found out that he was in the Union Army. And as I went through this genealogy, I got to a woman called Mary Boleyn. And I thought, oh man, that can't be that. So I checked her date of birth and death, and then I thought, it's got to be Anne Boleyn's sister. So I went to West Dallas Library and looked it up, and sure enough, it was the sister of Anne Boleyn. And then I was into kings, queens, and all kinds of other stuff. And and when you do that, I mean, it isn't just that, but when you research your family, you find stories. And it could be just a simple person, but they all have a story. And a lot of them are really interesting. It's really a great thing to do. And it's research. I guess I like to be a detective, and it's all detection work. I like detective movies. I even like Sherlock Holmes, even though he's got a funny hat.
All right. Now moving towards the last question. Over the course of the history of Milwaukee, do you think Milwaukee has developed for the better or for the worse?
Except for that silly streetcar they're putting in, it's for the better. There's a lot of animosity here and there between, well, not too much on the part of white people, but I shouldn't say stuff like this. But anyways, the news media and the Democrat Party, not Craddick, but Democrat Party, base everything on race, and they want us to fight in the streets so that they can control the government and ship jobs out of the country and create havoc all over the place. They're even willing to give the country away to the Chinese. I don't understand all these filthy rich people doing this stuff. But through the years, there hasn't been much trouble, except that everybody's got an axe to grind, no matter who you are. I mean, my grandparents, well, on my grandmother's side, they came in with a $10, which was a lot of money in those days. And then they got to be servants, and they worked themselves up. And, well, they got married. It was just the women mostly. And my wife gave me a book about Lincoln and the Irish. And I read it differently than other people. So I zeroed in on the Lincolns running for office in 1960 or 1860, about 59. And they were doing the same thing then as they're doing now. The Irish, which were the lower class at that time, and they were working on a railroad, and the railroads would take them from one town to another town, and just happened to be working in that area, so they could vote, and they'd vote for what the railroad people wanted them to vote. And Lincoln at one time heard that the Democrats were not going to allow people to vote that were Republican. So he took up a bat and went down there to make sure that everybody voted. Well, these people backed down and everything went okay. But this voting trouble, let's say, has been going on for not just from then, but from way back, and even in Roman times. And you always got this element that's the criminal element, and people doing against what the actual people in the country should be getting served. And it's like you look, people say, depends on who says it. If a liberal says everybody is the same, they don't really mean it. But when a conservative says everybody is the same, they mean that basically everybody is the same. We're all pulling for it. We all want to get ahead. We want to get ahead for our family, for our ethnic group, and we want to get ahead for our country. If we don't have a country and we don't have a border, we have no country. States and countries have borders. A state can be in a country, but a country can't be in a state. And then you go to nations. A nation is not something that has a border. That's a cultural group, a racial group, an ethnic group. It can be all over the place. And one of the things that pops into my mind is the Cherokee Nation. They're in several places in the United States, but it's still a nation. So all this trouble that we're having it disturbs me a lot, because you don't know who the heck's going to take us over. And you and I, maybe different cultures, but we were getting into the main culture. So, but we don't hate each other. We get along fine. Just somebody else, just like when you got two dogs on a porch, your problem is, how do you get them to fight? Well, you get them off the porch, you put them in a circle, and you start pushing them at each other. And they can't turn on you because you're outside the circle, but they can fight each other. So that's what they're doing. They're pushing these two dogs, many dogs, together at each other. So they create a lot of problems, and so that they can gain power. But once they gain power, they're screwed because there are other people outside our country that want to take us over, and they're just waiting for us to break up. And I shouldn't have said that.
To wrap everything up, is there anything that you had set aside that you would like to show the camera?
Well, I got this. Can you see this?
Yes.
This is a Jap rifle, and my dad brought this back from the Navy, and I didn't like it because you have to push down before you can push the bolt in. Something about, they keep complaining about President Roosevelt putting Japanese in concentration camps. But they weren't concentration camps, they were just camps. The concentration camps are really rough. When we do something bad, it's not that bad. But anyways, to give an insight into the Japs was, and I say Japs, because they wanted to take us over, they wanted to kill us. You wouldn't be here if they had won. One thing they would do is cut an X in the tip of their bullets, so that when they hit a person, they make a bigger hole. And it wasn't so much that they wanted to kill everybody, but if you injured somebody really bad, two people would have to take them back in back of the lines to somebody else. Somebody else would have to take care of them, take them to the first aid station, and then so on and so on. So that created a lot of trouble and wasted a lot of resources for anybody that they were fighting. And that caliber was a 7.7 Japanese bullet. And this is a 58 caliber rifle musket that we use. And I bought this, and it's a cap and ball. And you put a cap on here, you put the ball in here, well, you put the powder in here, then you put the ball, and then you put the wadding, and then you tap it down with this, and then you're ready to fire. And that's half cock. You ever hear the phrase going off half cocked? No?
Yes.
You're a boy and you haven't heard that? Oh boy. Anyways, that means that if you pull the trigger, it'll go off. But half cock usually is, it won't go off. Because you have to do that in order to put the nipple on here. That's the part that shoots the flame, and it goes into the powder. And it was a revolutionary idea. Oh, there's another thing. Here. To impress you, of all these are all the houses. Got all these are all the houses that I lived in. I went around and took pictures of them.
So you have the whole collection just in one book?
Yeah. And then these are all the cars that I had. Oh, that's another thing. I've been into photography for quite a while. So and then this is my pilot log book.
Is that the one you started the flight school with?
Yeah, that was my flying part. And then I took this from the county because we're going into something else. We're going into ARC Info, which these are plats. This is Atlas of the county. These are all plat maps. These are the plats that I worked on. I don't know if I can do this. I'm gonna wreck something. I don't know if you can see that. These are mostly quarter section.
Those are your
maps.
drawings, right?
Yeah, they're mostly all my drawing. I mean, 90% of these are my drawing. I did something on all the drawings. I didn't make all the drawings completely, but every year I make 2,000 to 2,200 changes in these maps. And sometimes I do the whole map. A lot of when I was in, they were doing a lot of condominiums, and I would do condominiums. And it's all to put tax key numbers on each plat, each plot. And so I got all my work here when I was in the Register of Deeds, not when I was in engineering. But, and then there's another thing. I think I mentioned that I had an expert at M1 carbine. Well, this is an M1 carbine. And I was also a marksman in the M1 rifle.
So you got training for those rifles?
Pardon?
You had the training for the rifles?
Yeah. Well, that's, you had to be able to shoot a rifle. Otherwise, there's no point in being a soldier.
That is true.
Like they say, no matter what you're doing, if you're a cook or whatever you're doing, the main thing is you're a soldier. You're supposed to know how to fight. And what else is there? I don't know. Unless you want to see a uniform or something. I mean, from the Suns.
Sure, yes.
Oh, here, something else. This is a plaque I got from Wisconsin Society of Certified Engineering Technicians. And I was an engineering technician of 1979. I also am certified nationally as an engineering technician. And when I did that, I was so used to going to tests for the county that I walked in with a pencil and a couple pens and erasers, and that's about it. Because that's what you usually do for the county tests. But when I was sitting there, all these guys started coming in with calculators and slide rules and books to take the test. And it was a general test. It was in math, reading, writing, nuclear technology. It was civil technology, mechanical technology, all these different groups. And I passed it with 91. So I wasn't too bad just sitting there with a couple pencils and pens. Not that I want to brag or nothing. You know I don't brag.
I'd take that grade any day.
Yeah, well, you could adjust it. It adjusted down to about 79, but it was a 91 and then went to 79. But anyways, as long as I passed, especially if I only had pencils and pens and stuff.
Yes.
Oh, that's another thing. When I was working in uh, structures at the county. So the boss, the engineer, wanted me to go to UWM for a class in structures. So I went there, and they'd start teaching, showing you through all the various engineering other classes. Each class was covering about a semester. So anyways, they'd start one board in front and go all the way to the end. Then they go up the side to where we were and doing this. And then they'd start over. And this was mostly math. And by the third time, I was walking out at night and I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and I said, my God, I can't do this, but I understand it. I can't be dumb. And that started my journey on being smart.
I don't think either of us, of the interviewers, have started to being smart yet.
Yeah, as long as you can get along with the average, I figure average is good. You, with some brilliant moments in between.
Yeah, just a couple.
But I always think that you don't trust anybody. You don't trust anybody, including yourself, because I've made some dumb moves, really dumb moves.
Well, Mr. Howard, we're going to wrap this up now. Thank you for your time, for giving us this interview and helping us with our school project. We really appreciate it. We are excited to get ready to post this and upload it to YouTube, so whoever wants to see can see it. We are excited to also post your story and let others, whoever wants to see it, whoever wants to, we can let them know about your story.
Okay,
Thank you for
thanks
your
a
time,
lot.
Sir Howard.
Yeah, you did a good job, at least as far much as I can see.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.